I recently read that comparison is the death of contentment, that we cannot be content if we are stuck in the trap of comparison. Yet comparison, it runs rampant in our culture. We continuously compare vacations, home, cars, salary, children, beauty, ability. People continually evaluate where they are in regards to others. And social media just heightens this trap where people compare one to another. You either puff yourself up, making yourself look good, or you knock yourself down, making yourself feel pretty bad. It's one reason that anxiety has gone through the roof, especially with our teens. We are constantly comparing ourselves and making distinctions between groups of people. This is what's happening in our political landscape. Each side basically says, we're right, and look at those people on the other side. They're wrong, they're evil. Well, this is not a new phenomenon. It's happened for centuries. In fact, it happened in biblical times. And it's one of the reasons that Jesus told a parable about two men praying. The first man was a Pharisee. Now, the Pharisees of the first century were a Jewish movement that emphasized the importance of obedience to the law of Moses. Their attention to things like rituals for cleansing one's body or one's cookware was part of a larger effort to encounter God's holiness in everyday life. And I think that's what we all want to do too, to encounter God's holiness in our everyday lives. Yet sometimes these Pharisees took it too far and they thought they knew what was best, and they were seen as arrogant or condescending, saying things like the one in this parable when he went up to the temple to pray. And he said, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, those thieves and those sinners and those cheaters, or even like that tax collector over there. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all my income. This Pharisee was puffing himself up as a really good person. Yet the second man, who also went to the temple to pray, was a tax collector. Now, tax collectors were not saints by any stretch of the imagination. They upheld the Roman interest at the expense of the people of God. They were seen as traitors, and the tax gathering system was notoriously corrupt. So these men were generally viewed as dishonest and greedy. They were slimy opportunists, willing to victimize their own neighbors while assisting the occupiers. But this tax collector, he stood far off from the temple. He would not even look up to heaven, but rather he was beating his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And Jesus said, I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, this parable was meant to shock his listeners. The Pharisees is a good guy. He doesn't do anything wrong except puff himself up a little bit. And the tax collector? He's the scoundrel. He's the bad guy. Why does Jesus say that he is the one who is justified? How does that work? The tax collector makes neither sacrifice nor restitution. On what basis then is he justified? Well, the point that Jesus is making is that the tax collector is justified by God and God's extravagant grace. It may not make sense to us, and it's not how our world works. Yet it tells us who God is, that God loves us with extravagant grace. The tax collector did nothing to earn it, except he opened his heart saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. So we learn that our job is not to judge or compare. That only creates divisions and strife between people. We are never going to be happy or content or feel good about ourselves if we constantly compare ourselves to others. Rather, we acknowledge in the eyes of God, we have to seek mercy. We don't have to prove our worth to God or anyone else. Rather, we just have to open our hearts to the holy. Perhaps then it's time for us to pause for a moment and to come clean with who we are and who God is. We recognize our own human limitations. We don't have all the answers. We don't do everything right. But God graciously immerses us in love and forgiveness, surrounding us with mercy. So then we can go forth offering that same mercy to others. That's our job. Go in peace, my friends, and mercy. God be with you.